I know, right? Exciting. All right, so first call to order, approved minutes from 4/18/22. Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those, any questions? Yes? Any
No,
changes?
questions. I was eager.
Lay off the Red Bull. Okay. All right, without any changes, all those in favor, approving? Thank you. Citizen comments? Okay, we're going to juggle a few things around tonight because we have some people that are going to be presenting and help present that are going to be leaving soon. So we're going to do a little shell game like we did last month.
You get right on your toes.
Yep, which worked out great. So first up will be Micah.
All right, so I need Jess and Allison and Gail to join. Let's see.
I can run that.
Yeah, Allison, you're in charge of the buttons. Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Wonderful. So, hello everyone. This is your Jackson Grammar School Enrichment Committee. We formed to look at what the needs were and how to respond to those needs and to create a program that was based on creatively using the assets that we have in this town and also meeting the needs. So we have Gail, who's obviously key to be on the committee. She's the principal and the big boss. We have Allison, who's not only a parent but also is on the staff. And she provides some of the after-school enrichment programming in Bartlett, so she has that context. And then we have Jess, who is a former school board member, a parent, and she also ran Project Succeed, which for those of you who don't know, is a Conway-wide project program for enrichment. So what we're going to do tonight, let's pop this into the next slide, is we're going to share with you, we were tasked with coming up with to sort of look at what's happening and come up with some next steps. So we're going to do talk about the current programming that's offered. We're going to do a comparative analysis inside the Valley. We're talking about the needs, share a proposed plan and budget, and give you guys time for questions. And we do encourage the public to jump in with questions and comments during that. All right. So the current program. Right now, the way things work in Jackson Grammar School, Gail, do you want to speak to this, just because this is the program?
Well, I think maybe Jerry and Jen and maybe Kevin are the only ones that go back far enough to know we had an enrichment committee back in 2009, 2010. Oh, Joan, because she was our teacher for a while. So we did a lot of research and we looked at a lot of schools and we adopted Renzulli, who is the guru or was the guru of gifted and talented education, and he had a whole school enrichment model. So we modeled our program after his and wanted to provide a sampling for every child in the building with every sort of possible interest at the elementary level to kind of foster a wide variety of different things that kids might be interested in. So that was all pre-COVID, and at that point it was an enrichment teacher combined with our special educator position. So we had 50% special educator and 50% enrichment. And that job involved not only after-school program, but some of the artist in residencies and bringing in speakers and organizing some of the all-school meeting topics. Since then, we've had staff turnovers and changes, and it moved to a 2-day-a-week program. It says inconsistent dates and times. It was intended to be Monday through Wednesday, all year long, with sessions changing every 6 to 8 weeks, augmented by staff members to provide different types of enrichment. At the moment, we haven't had a person in that position since January. And when COVID came, we had bags, and we saw the bags on the chairs out in front, and the families would come and take their bags home. And then Cassie, who was our leader at that point, would lead virtual enrichment opportunities over the computer. So getting it back and going again since the pandemic has been really challenging, and to date, I have had no applicants.
Great, thanks, Gail. And one thing to point out,
Can I just mention one more time, as Erica came in, and right now she is running 1 day a week just to keep something available for students, and Allison has run some things to try to fill in the gaps between a formal program and
awesome. Yeah, and typically those things have been capped at 12 students and almost always have a wait list these days. And the other thing to know is that they're not consistently available for every kid of all ages. So they based on the enrichment, they're, sometimes it's perfectly great to have a K through 6 there, and sometimes it gets targeted. So we just wanted to share that with you as kind of a starting point, and then we're going to do a comparative analysis. So Jess, this is yours.
Okay, so we wanted to just give you a visual of what programs look like, because, and what we wanted to do was also just kind of get a beat on what are we looking at in terms of service to students across the valley, right? So when you look at all the schools around us, K through 6, basically what you see, each column is each school. When you look at Conway, which is what Project Succeed serves, you have Pine Tree, Conway Elementary, and John Fuller. And the focus there is generally the second week of school. It starts after school program. We also serve morning program as well. And that goes basically until the end of the school year. And then as far as fees go, we wanted to give you an idea of what that costs folks. So for Project Succeed, it's a sliding fee. And what that means is there is a set fee, but depending on folks' ability to pay, you can apply for a scholarship, and no students ever turned away for an ability to pay. So then you look at Bartlett, and you can see they also base it on the academic year, as does Robert Frost and Northeast Woodlands. And you can see the rates at the bottom there. Depending on their abilities, Bartlett has some of the same challenges we have here as far as staff goes and things like that. I've worked with Annette over there, both as a parent, as a volunteer, and as an employee of the district. Although Bartlett's in a different position, they have 2 days a week afternoon right now. And then Robert Frost has AM and PM. They actually are allowed to send their kids to Conway's Project Succeed, so they rely on that for some things. And then Northeast Woodlands is 5 days PM only. And for those who don't know, Northeast Woodlands and Robert Frost are both charter schools. Great. Any questions about that?
Hi, yeah, so just a comment, the $15 per session for Jackson, it's people can pay or not pay, the scholarships available, so no sort of way.
Great.
And then can you just elaborate on which ones are, how they're funded? Is that your next slide?
Yeah, well, I'll just answer it now. So as far as Project Succeed, that is funded by a 21st Century grant, which is primarily, that's a federal grant that then filters through the state. That's the bulk of the funding. And then it's funded by a warrant article that comes through the Conway School, the Conway School budget. And then there are lots of donations, and depending on the service, there's also lots of grants that we went after. So there are multiple streams of funding, and it really depends on who's running the program.
Yeah, so some of the programs have an amalgamation of parent and guardian funding, grants, warrant articles, budget items, you name it. So it's quite a variety.
Conway is the biggest program, and that is the other piece. There is obviously the fees fund a portion of it as well. Bartlett is primarily funded by fees and then some donations. There are some grants that she gets as well, and some partners will pitch in-kind donations and things like that. Robert Frost and Northeast Woodlands, it's fees. They rely on Project Succeed to some degree, Robert Frost only, and then some donations. But they're not funded by federal or state grants in that way.
Jerry, did you have a question?
Yeah, as far as the program itself is concerned, are these all apples to apples comparisons? Program the same types of things offered in them?
So one thing to note, and I'll let Jess speak to this further, but Jess has more information about this, but I got to wade in as a novice in it, right? So you can ask questions that sometimes you can get away with. So for example, like Bartlett has focused on a non-enrichment based program. So that's a really distinct difference. And one thing we looked at was, would we just send our kids to Bartlett? And one of the things that we came up with is that we really want an enrichment-based program, and that's also because we can access grants that way. Because if this is an enrichment-based program where we don't turn kids away, then we can pursue those grants versus just sending the kids to Bartlett and tuitioning them in. The other programs that are Project Succeed are enrichment-based. Justin, speak more to that.
Yes, so to talk about apples to apples, there are terms of art, which I don't want to go down too far of a rabbit hole, but I love talking about this, so I will go down the rabbit hole. As Micah said, there are enrichment-based programs, and then there are basically play-based programs that are childcare. So in Conway, we are enrichment programs in Conway, And that means that it is purposeful play, it is directed play. There's always a reason for what happens. There are educators that are planning what happens with students, even if they're out on the playground, it's for a reason. And the other piece of that is that whether it actually happens all the time, and anyone who's an educator will tell you, even when we plan it, it doesn't always the way we imagine it, especially the last 2 years. There's always the plan to tie it into what's happening during the school day, because there's lots of evidence that tells you that when you do that, we have better outcomes. And there are tons of outcomes that show you the importance of after school and what we call out of school time. So Bartlett Recreation, they basically are watching children, and I think they do a really wonderful job at that. But that's not their primary focus. They don't want that to be the primary focus. They don't have it. It doesn't have to be. And I will say in Conway, it actually has to be part of the focus because of the funding sources that we rely upon through the programming. So, and Robert Frost and Northeast Woodlands, obviously for Project Succeed, it's enrichment based, but I think they try to follow the same line.
Okay. All right, Allison, you're up with the need assessment.
Oh, need assessment. Okay, so as a parent, working parent and whatnot, so thank you for welcoming me on this committee. So one of the biggest thing or biggest concern for me was to keep our children safe, my child safe, and participating in enriching activities. That was a big thing. And a reliable program that would give working parents a bit of peace of mind too, something that would be consistent. So with that, Micah, I believe it was Micah, who sent out a survey to the Jackson community, to parents and guardians. And so these are part of the results, and then elaborate a little bit more on that. So 83% of us through the survey said that we would pay between $6 to $15. So 26% of the parents indicated that they wanted 2 days a week, perhaps. 31% said 3 or 5 days a week. So there was 31% said 3 days a week, another 31% said 5 days, and only 10% said 4 days a week. So,
Yeah, so like high level, 100% of the people said they needed it 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
So for 26 kids. And 100% of people said they pay a fee, and also said they didn't need transportation. So that was really helpful. That was inside of our strategic planning process when we said, do we need to dig into this more? Should that be something that we're looking at delivering? All right.
Can I just
Yes,
it also raised for us an issue that came up repeatedly, which is, okay, so they need 3 to 5 days. What days? Because obviously we wanted to be fiscally responsible. So we want to meet the need. We also want to be fiscally responsible. How do we do that? How do we decide which of the days we actually do? So you're going to see that coming up repeatedly, and it's a question we would hopefully have you all consider, because that's on our minds.
Yes.
You can't do everything.
Thanks, Jess. So what we put together is a proposal for the school year that starts in September, so the 22-23 school year. And we really see this as like a pilot program. Now, of course, there has been a program that's been running, but to make this consistent for all kids with this kind of structure, it becomes a pilot. And the reason we're calling it that is that then we can have some flexibility, right? We can decide if we've been able to get great grant funding, we can augment it to 4 days a week for the following school year. But we, as Jess said, we wanted to start in a way that was palatable from a budget sense and also from a school sense. So 3 days a week for 35 weeks of programming that begins the second week of school, that operates Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's very deliberate because it has the least amount of sport crossover. Also, generally, parents say Friday is not the day that they're looking. That's the easiest day for them to jettison out of programming, and that's something universally held throughout the Valley and in general, this kind of programming. It would run from 3 to 4:45, and it would be parent caregiver transportation. So that means that parents would be picking up their kids at the end of the day. There would be 2 staff. We have a program coordinator who's a current fixture, although not filled, but currently in the budget, and then an enrichment provider who becomes a support staff. And we can talk more about those differences, but it's really, as most of you know, you have to have 2 people when you're working with kids, right? There can't just be one person running this program. So how do we fill that need? And that coordinator really takes on the mantle of running this program, making sure that the enrichments are coordinated, that they're coordinating with, in this case with student and with Gail or whoever the administration is, and makes this thing run. We're looking at serving 30 students with a 1 to 15 ratio. And it would be located at Jackson Grammar School. So we looked at the church, we looked at some other ideas, and ultimately decided that having it at Jackson Grammar School made the most sense because we have, that space isn't being used in that time. And then the Whitney Center has offered to come forward for 1 day a week of programming, which will be finalized. The outdoor space will be used as much as possible during times when that's possible, and we all know that at Jackson that's a priority, and that's made to happen, but you have to have a place where it's housed. Just saying it's going to be outdoors for, the fall doesn't really solve it.
Yes, it's natural, but it's at the schools. All these programs happen at
They all, yes, thank you, for sure, Kate, yeah, we wanted to look at other options just in case, but you're absolutely right, all the other programs happen at the school.
Okay.
So-
What we don't have is a gym or cafeteria or an alternative place.
But
that
like here, but like
students
the
go.
fluidity between the Whitney and here.
But it's,
Yeah.
Okay, so we integrated with the Jackson Sports Program, which we have its own slide about because people are very committed. And it's an enrichment program, which is really important to highlight for a number of reasons. Among them are grants, right? So right now, and you'll see, we've talked about how to pay for this without grants, but there are a lot of grants out there. And we have a PTO who's great at writing grants, and we have a lot of parents who are really committed to making this happen. So, there's strong potential for that. And then,
If I can jump in.
please.
Also, I'm just, it also is super important because when you look at evidence-based intentional programming, we know that the outcomes are over here as far as the benefits to our students and to our community when it's an enrichment program. And I know that sounds like what does the word enrichment mean? I'll send you any literature you want, come and talk to me anytime you want. Kevin will tell you, I love to read about all of this. But it's not just about the money, although it is about the money for us, we try to be careful about that. It's about how can we serve our kids the best, because they are our priority. It's what's in the best interest of our kids. And so across the board, not just academically, not just socially, not just emotionally, it's for our community as well. We wanted it to be the strongest we can make it. And also sustainability-wise, how can we make that work?
Just jump in.
Thank you for letting me do that.
Anytime, just cut me out. So students sign up by semester, and then they pay for what they sign up for. So that's a similar model used other places, right? So there's commitment from families that we ask for, because that actually helps with the sustainability. All right, Allison. So what we're looking at is a sliding fee scale, which people submit a confidential scholarship form. No child is turned away based on inability to pay. Modeled on the way it's done at Project Succeed. If you do full pay lunch, you pay $10 a day. If you do reduced pay lunch, it's $5. If you do free lunch, it's $1. And so that becomes managed. Again, you have semesterly commitments, and the revenue helps offset the operational costs. The other thing that we would recommend is that we review this quarterly. So let's say we find out that there's way more kids signing up for this than we thought. Well, suddenly we might be able to have 4 days. Or, conversely, there's far fewer. Do we need to ratchet down for 2 days? That gives us a little bit of space during this pilot program to say, this was what the need was that was expressed. What is it in reality? When it's time for people to bring their kids in, what are we really looking at? Okay. So this is a proposed budget. So this shows your expenses. So we have the coordinator position, you have the support position, and then we have a very minor amount of other expenses. So the total expenses for this program would be a little bit over $35,000. And we're happy to share this presentation with anyone who wants to have a deeper dive. Yes.
I was listening and not reading the slides as much. Does every other school in our SAU have after-school programming consistently?
Every other grammar school has consistent after-school programming available to kids of every age that attend that school. It's not based on, some days it's this kid's program because it's universally, you go to that school, you can access after-school enrichment program. Okay. Yeah, that's a really important distinction. And that's effectively this is trying to bring Jackson up to speed for that, because we're the only school in the valley that hasn't had that, right? And so that's been a gap.
But with the same probably ratio and of working parents.
Exactly.
We're not related to staff. Right, but we're not different from a demographic.
No, we're exactly the same number.
And I think that's one of the reasons I looked years ago with Joe Vosi at the 21st Century Learning Grant, because it is geared at lower income towns and populations, so we obviously don't qualify for any of that particular grant, the 21st Learning Center grant.
Although I think that would be worth re-looking at.
Yeah, I think I wonder if that's still true.
And one of the things, maybe not tonight, but one of the things we did work on were job descriptions, and one of the things we're looking at doing is sort of transitioning that coordinator position from sort of just being that person who's there each time to really being director of the program for you guys, so that they're the person, and we try to put in time so that they're not just there when the parents show up. They're there planning and setting up, and they're out there meeting with families. They're taking the burden off of Susan, who's in the front office, and they're making sure that forms are signed, and that, you know, if there are people that need to meet, if we need to go over to J-Town and figure out, hey, we want to do a cooking demonstration, how could we work that out? Is there something that we could do? They're that person, and they're looking at grants, they're figuring out how to write it. If they don't know how to do it, they're going to go seek that help. So we are proposing to the board that that's the type of person, if we can recruit them, you get in here.
And you know, that sits inside with the approved rate to pay that person that's already been passed through the budget. So then the revenue that we have is we have a, next slide. Oh no, it's not working. Okay, so the revenue is that we have right now already inside the budget this 10,000 plus line item, okay, for the after school program. We also have a summer budget, a summer program budget, and I don't want to get into a whole conversation about the summer program, but I will say one thing we'd like to do is see this solve for that next year. It's not possible to solve for that this year, right? So there is budget that's been approved for this summer's program, and most likely there will be some left over. And we had hoped we would have that final number by now, but that was not entirely in our control. So right now we're estimating at about $8,000. So in addition to that, there's tuition. There's revenue that we've talked about bringing in. So for a conservative estimate, we did it on 19 students. Remember, we saw that many kids were expressed interest attending all 3 days, but tiered so that only 85% of them are paying full rate, and 50% of them are paying free lunch rate, which is $1 per day. So just to remember that, right? To sort of give us a sample of what would this really look like. So in the end, with the tuition and with the guaranteed sources, this is a zero cost, like line item cost in the budget. So that's something that's pretty important for us to point out, right? All right, next. So in terms of additional pieces on the budget, as Jess was saying, the coordinator is expected to seek funding, grants, donations, you name it, for the following school year, but also for 23-24, but also this school year. The sun is not set on the 22-23 school year and what's possible. And oftentimes in some towns, they get donation money. Businesses that are involved, they're like, I want to support this. This hasn't happened. People come and put skin in the game in other ways. The other thing, and we mentioned this, is that budget that we created with 19 students nets $172. And I want to just remind everybody that what we're presenting and we're recommending to the board is that we review this quarterly. So if this is not meeting expectations or if it is exceeding expectations, we can adjust for it. So this is not something that gets set in stone. We also looked at some creative solutions to think about staffing and fiscal responsibility. So one of the things is there a paraprofessional that exists right now who wants to add hours so they could be full-time and play that role of the support staff? Do we want to look at rotating Jackson Grammar School staff, which other schools do, to take that second position? So instead of trying to fill 2 positions, right? We all know what's one of the biggest issues, staffing shortages, right? How do we crack this nut? Because effectively this program is going to live or die on if we can fill this position. So what we really want to do is put all of our chutzpah into filling the coordinator position. And then also really work hard to fill that support position. But we might have to get creative about that support position. So we just wanted to list some ideas that we've been thinking about. You would also utilize with volunteers, with contracted partners. So all those things exist, but the bottom line is even inside of that, you need to have one coordinator who owns this. Because the administrator or the principal doesn't have this additional time to run this program. And I think that's really important for us to all acknowledge. Yes.
Quick question about number 2, the rotating of the Jackson staff, would that also be a parent that would commit to so many weeks of...
Exactly, it could be parents and they could say,
so
look, we need to lift up this program. We found 1 staff member, we can't find 2, but we're in if you're in. Can you commit? That's not sort of a hazy commitment, right? Could you step into this so that we can run this program? And in fact, what I've learned through this process is that oftentimes we had an asterisk, it's to little school with a big heart, the way this stuff happens sometimes for other schools is when it gets tough, people step in because they believe in providing this for the community. So, yeah.
Yeah, if I could just speak to that. Kevin can tell you, when a project succeeded in our darkest times in the past couple of years, we were so short-staffed you may have seen, we were putting up a call repeatedly with the community, and one of the things we knew was that we have people in the community with vast skills and with time, and even when they didn't have time, we had people who were so committed to the importance of our program because I can tell you it's that important to families that we fill that need in Conway schools. So we would have people like, and I'm going to embarrass you for a second, can I do that? Pam Stimson this year, like not 3 or 4 months ago, literally came to Project Succeed at John Fuller. She didn't even see me first, which I'm going to forgive you for that, but we were so short-staffed we were going to have to close a group, and I found out through the coordinator that, or the director of special services at the SAU was giving up her Tuesdays to come and work at our program because she did not want that cohort to close. So obviously we didn't have to pay her, but ideally what happens is we get a coordinator who comes in and says, okay, so we have the year, this is when the school system is this is when we start, this is what we would like to do. Hey, does anyone want to do anything Apple related for the fall? Because we'll try to follow it seasonally. And then maybe you have folks who are invested in a 6-week stint or a 4-week stint, and they say, I can commit to these times, and I would like to get paid for these, or I will volunteer for these. We make sure they're background checked, and we get them onto our master list of people, right? And we can make sure, we work with the SAU, we work with Gail, so that we're coordinating all these people. And in fact, I think the program will be richer for it, because I can tell you, Kevin, we have over 100 people we pulled through Conway that brought so many skills. So many talents and skills. Things we never imagined that they would bring to our kids. So if we pull in the right person who's willing to bring that enthusiasm in that organization, the richness it can bring to our kids is, I wish I could have realized it more before I had to move on from Project Succeed.
I think an important, in the strategic planning process, one of the top things that our community identified was further integration between the school and the community, right? So this gives us another way to do that outside of typical school hours. And I think that there's a hunger for that, right? Especially post-COVID, people are like, hey, how do we actually create community? What does it look like? So that helps us identify. So the schedule is the next slide. So how we put it together is that Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are what we're looking at. So you see there's no conflict on Mondays. We took it off of Tuesday because there's soccer and there's Nordic. Wednesday, there's no conflicts. Thursday, there is soccer in the afternoon, and we'll speak to that, so everyone just take a breath, I promise, and the Nordic piece. So, if we wanted to add a 4th day with the same enrollment projections, we would only be down $857. We're not recommending that, so please don't fly your flag on that, but we're just kind of giving the context that the cost to run this plus the revenue that we have already identified nets out effectively. And so if you add in grants and future grants and the whatnot, we're in a pretty good position. Yeah.
So as far as casting the net to find this coordinator,
Yes.
what qualifications is this? Does this have to be a certified teacher? What are we talking about?
So it is, and we have, right?
Right, it does
It
not.
does not. Okay,
It's
so-
preferred,
Yes.
not required.
Yeah. And it's $30 an hour. That's been approved in the budget that person is making. And as we talked about, that role is not just for the hours that the kids are there, that they're holding this bigger piece of it. So it's 13 and a half hours of work based on a 3-day-a-week program. Joan, go.
Well, I had a question on the other slide.
Yeah.
The slide before that, Allison, sorry.
Okay. No
I'm
worries.
just thinking about how this works.
Yeah.
And, increasing a paraprofessional position to full-time.
Yeah.
So that means you add some extra hours to the paraprofessionals who are already here 30 hours, is that true?
That's true.
Yep.
So then you bring them up to full-time at their current salary,
Yes.
and then at full-time you also need to pay them,
Boom. Yes.
their insurance and everything that comes with a full-time employee.
Yes.
So was that figured in your budget before?
Yeah, so Gail,
I'm just curious about
No,
that.
please.
30 hours here in Jackson, they are eligible already for retirement and health. So there would be a bit higher pay into those things, but I don't think we figured out exactly what that would look like.
I just got just.
No, it's exactly the question.
And just because we have our insurance meeting tomorrow. And then the other, the question, so rotating JGS staff paid on a stipend.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious about what that means in terms of who rotates and how. I know that's a nitpicky detail, but when you just showed the little schedule up there, that soccer is Tuesday and Thursday, but on this side you also have Advantage Kids, which is Wednesdays. So, then there's Advantage Kids in there. They currently serve everybody in the valley, so for them to give up their Wednesdays just for Jackson, I don't, but that is a different thing. I'm not sure how that works, but I guess I just want, maybe I'm being a little bit nitpicky because I know my life right now is running back and forth to Kennett a whole lot. For the things that my kid is involved in. So I don't know how you see us rotating and how that's set into a schedule.
Yeah.
Because there's maybe a couple months out of the year where I can say I'm not running around tonight to get up Jack.
Yeah.
But
so,
I'm just curious what that vision looks like.
Absolutely, Joe. No, it's a super good question, and that's why we put it there. Is that here's a host of creative ways. Our priority would be to staff the coordinator position and staff the support position, so we don't have to go into this. If we can't find someone, if the para role can't add hours to which sounds like a really slick way to solve for that support position, right? Yeah. But if suddenly we're in this position where we have a coordinator, but the program is not going to run because we don't have a support staff position, then it's time to start being like, how would this work? Could Joan do it for 6 weeks? Awesome, she gets paid a stipend. Could Allison come and volunteer for this part? Can Beth Ann do this, right? It becomes like, how do we source this so that this thing happens?
Spencer comes on lessons.
Yeah, exactly. Pam's involved. But it really becomes and the goal is that it's two things. It's the money and it's the staffing. And I think that what we're recommending is that we believe that there's enough creative solutions that if we do this, let's go find that support position so we're not stressed and asking the coordinator. That's our ultimate recommendation. But let's also know that there might be some options for how we could all sort of creatively bootstrap that position. So that's my answer versus saying here's our total vision. It's like, Joan, you're on. Did you know that?
Right.
I guess that's unrealistic
right now. How that,
and
what does that look like in the plan?
I can talk to that too, just from a different, I think we're in the same boat, very much in the same boat, carting back and forth. But at Bartlett, I've been working at Bartlett after-school program with middle school students with mountain science, and they do need a on-staff person for that. It is stipend. But basically, we were able to choose, the days and and that's how it worked out for 10 sessions type of thing. So,
And if I can jump in as well. So one, this is the time to be a meeting. We purposely presented this tonight because we wanted the community and the board and the staff to hear what our proposal was. It's a proposal because we wanted feedback so that you could think about it. You didn't have to make decisions tonight, so that you could be challenged, because we think best decisions are made this way. And input could be given back to us and we give it to the board before they make their decisions on how we're going to move forward. That being said, I'm about evidence-based practices and best practices. As the lady at the table, who we did not agree on everything all the time, so I can tell you that. I personally feel very strongly that connection, daytime, in school time to after school time, we know that if we can connect those things, it is better for our students. So personally, I would love to see that connection. We're not going to tell you how to do that. We would never do that. We don't know what's happening at the school. We don't know what the schedules are. I can tell you, I personally feel so strongly that there should be staff in the program present from the daytime to the after school time. And I also share your burden because I have a kid in high school, middle school, and elementary school that do a million things. I gave up my position in Project Succeed because I could not physically be there. So, which was a great loss to me personally because I loved it professionally. So I do put my money where my mouth is when it comes to this stuff. So it would have to come up to what you guys think as far as the community goes. But I think it says a lot about a community when people want to be there. So I would just ask you to please think about that as you're making decisions.
Do the other schools that are represented in this information that you gathered on this, are there classroom teachers and educators from the building involved in these after-school opportunities?
Yeah.
Consistently, folks that are there, and are they there all the time? Are they there some of the time? They commit to chunks?
Yeah, so it varies. We actually have one of our lengthiest employee at Project Succeed is a 6th grade teacher. She's a site coordinator for one of our schools. She runs an excellent program. And one of the reasons our program is so effective there is because of the loyalty that the staff have to her. So she's able to put in a call and say, hey, listen, I need this. And her people just show up. So, that's another added benefit. So aside from that, we get teachers that do it. They'll say, I can't do a whole semester, but I have 4 weeks that I can do this, or I can fill in. I mean, that was a big thing for us. They'd say, just like Pam filled in for us in a crisis situation, she's not, just so you know, she is not a permanent employee of John Project Succeed.
Or your hopes.
I should have clarified that before, as much as we would have loved it. So, it is what people are able to do, how they can prioritize it, and, moreover, as far as the teachers go, we have some people that, what we ended up doing is we actually got a lot of retired folks too. So that's another thing to put the call out to.
No, we have those here.
And if I could just add one thing though, we have 4 classroom teachers, 5 full-time, everyone else works part-time, and they're expected to do curriculum committees for SAU 9 and be part of all of the other extracurriculars, the concerts and the things like that. So when you only have so many people to go around, I know we have SAU-wide committees that don't have a representative from Jackson because we all have at least one, some of us have 2 committees that we're on district-wide. So, because you have fewer people to choose from, it gets watered down really quickly.
Go ahead, Jen.
I just want to be careful from a fiscal standpoint, and you may have gone over this, but just reviewing what happened at our last town budget meeting, that we tried to get a teacher, a librarian, technical person voted in, and that got at the last minute. That we're not necessarily utilizing any of the school budget for this because we've already been told in the past that the community doesn't want to pay for after-school care.
Yeah, but that's also a different time, and we
Right.
have a school budget that already has after-school care put in it, and so we're using things as they are already intended in the budget, and we're augmenting that with a tuition. So it's in line with what's been voted on by our town.
Just want us to be really careful.
Yeah, Kevin, do you want to add to, or just say Mike is right, or what do you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate your enthusiasm
Yeah.
and speaking to a few different things.
Yeah.
Absolutely, there's a need for this. I mean, we offered some grant programming even during April vacation, right? 2 different, Whimsy was there, we did a performing arts piece, and there were kids from all over the place who went. And that was during April vacation, so there is that population. Number 2, Becky Jefferson retired, so I'm kind of assuming the role, I've already had this conversation with Micah, that you cannot, you are the fiscal agents, you the board, but you cannot overspend your budget. You have the authority to move monies, and I've spoken to Micah very clearly and Jessica. Whenever you build these programs, I think that it's important. You have enthusiastic people here. One of the things that you want to do is build for sustainability, right? So you don't know where this will be, but I also know that working with Jessica and other folks, there are a lot of grants out there. There are different ways to raise those funds. And that's why we talked about, yes, you have to have these checks and balances along the way. Can you move money? You can, but I think when you build your budget, you build it for specific reasons. And if you are going to transfer funds from one place to another, there has to be a really, really good reason to do that because you're building that trust with the general public as you go through. So, I think, as you move down this road to see what are those revenues that you're getting from parents, right? You may find that everybody's paying and they're paying more. And you do a fundraiser, the kids are producing something that generates $1,000 or $5,000, whatever it happens to be. You come across a grant that comes forward. You partner. There are different ways to do that. But I would be, as a board, and you folks have been very good about this, things do happen with your budget throughout the year. And needs do come up, and I think that you're going about this the right way in gathering input, but I agree with you, you want to be careful about not overextending yourself to do that.
And those quarterly checks are what we recommended, and Mike, I want to hear you speak, because I saw your hand up, that's a way for us to do that. So what we're not suggesting, and we'll get to the end of what we recommend next steps are, we're not saying the board's like wholeheartedly 4 days a week, come hell or high water, right? We're saying, let's do a pilot program, let's do it 3 days a week. let's get this let's authorize Gail, the personnel committee, to come up with those job descriptions. Let's see if we can hire these two pieces, and then let's have quarterly check-ins to be able to recalibrate, so that we can learn. Yeah.
Just before we jump away from the budget.
Yeah.
And, just so I understand clearly,
Yeah.
we're talking about a total cost for a little over $33,000, about half of which is coming from the current budget.
Exactly. Yep.
That's for the enrichment position.
Exactly.
And
Already
and
stated.
the summer program.
Yep.
Combined. So that's covering half of it, and then the other half will be coming from revenue.
Yes.
And then hopefully we'll get grants on top of it. So this is money that's targeted in the budget. We're not shifting money from one place in the budget to another.
Not at all.
The only place we are in the summer program, which we've already identified, is definitely not going to be used. So that's perfectly legitimate money to use, because we know it's not going to be utilized for its original purpose was.
Thanks, Jerry.
And just to speak to that, Jerry, because it's a good point, I want to highlight the fact that we really tried to be respectful of the fact that parents and caregivers wanted to be invested in this. They were willing to put funding into it. This isn't just going to be a free program that goes out to families. There's a need that we recognize, and they're willing to do their part. We've actually had people come forward and say, I would like to work in the program. I would help if you need us. So, part of what we're thinking is if we can start with that coordinator, and if we properly support them and give them a very clear expectations, and we're behind them, it's going to come down to leadership. And the money will come, and the enthusiasm will come, and they will be waiting at that door for those kids, and it will happen, right? And we will monitor it, and we do it in a transparent way, so that if something isn't going the way it's intended, you go back to the drawing board. So, and we tried to build in some flexibility, right? So, and if we didn't, then that's what you tell us, so that we can change it, and you can vote on a different plan.
And I think it's fair to say that your estimates on revenue was conservative.
Yeah, we really tried. It was like, that's not what we were. Mike, did you want to jump in?
I was wondering if we could have a little more, just a little bit more of the integration of soccer and Nordic.
Perfect.
And
That's the next slide. I was like, you're with me.
What that looks like.
Yeah, so Jess has to leave, unfortunately, so everyone thank Jess. Don't ask me any hard questions that I can't answer them either. Okay, so here you go, Mike. So what we looked at is that Monday and Wednesday, the programming has no overlaps with the sports that we have. Thursday program. So when this overlaps with soccer and skiing, which you know intimately, right? The students who sign up for these sessions are choosing to play the sports for these sessions. Does that make sense? So there's not like you can either or it. You basically, during soccer, the Thursday program is soccer. During ski, the Thursday program is ski, which means we can also use our coordinator and our support person to help run those programs, right? And then that helps us, that basically helps us that we still have a strong sport showing. And that's something we went back and forth on quite a bit, but it seemed like this was the way to really support the sports that are such a heart.
Because I think we just had a conversation with Bartlett, and I thought of you, Jerry, in terms of the smaller your student body gets, the more options they have, the fewer students that are available to field a soccer team or have kids skiing and competitive at the, continuing up through high school like our traditions have been. So I was really strongly wanting to keep them separate. And the other issue was that our soccer and our Nordic programs have been completely cost-free.
Yes.
To families.
Which they would stay that way. So effectively, you kind of think that we haven't, that's another step we just didn't get to, is you think about it by sessions, right? There's a little session that happens before soccer starts. It's only a couple weeks. That's here are the days. Then soccer starts, and effectively for you to sign your kid up, if you choose Thursday, there's no cost for your Thursday session because they're playing soccer, and that's so if you that's how those sessions are administered. So each of those is a decision point for parents about how they want to enroll their children. Does that help answer that?
That's super helpful, because that was my biggest question.
No, that's great.
Was because I'm on the youth committee at the ski touring, and so I just feel like we work really hard to make sure the programs are free for local students.
No, we wouldn't want to change
I wouldn't want to, I just think, make it feel a little squishy if we were charging $10 and then using advantage kids or ski touring that had free programming.
Yeah, so think about it as for you, and we can, we need to just tee up that side and just didn't get to it, was sort of showing how those sessions work, right? So that's absolutely fundamental to this. Susan?
Yeah, I guess something to consider, it would be hard to answer right now, is that when we get back to real life, We will be traveling for soccer games, especially the 3, 4, 5, 6. And their soccer game might not fall on the enrichment day of soccer. So just something to think about and ways to go around that.
Yeah, and I think there's other questions like, how do you handle it if someone's sick? What do you do? And I think what we need to do is, again, what Jess was saying, I'll channel her for a moment, is like putting the right person in lead, like hiring the right person who can manage this and say, absolutely, so that's happening because it's soccer, so this is how we're gonna work around it, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm working with the parents to understand that, so that everybody feels like they're in integrity with these choices. Because there's a lot of minutia that will need to get figured out, which you all know way better than I know. But what I want to kind of keep this conversation about is like, minutia and details are incredibly important, like logistics are a love language for sure. Let's talk about what we want to create and put kind of like a stake in the ground as a board, and then say, let's let those details get ironed out by the people that we want to bring into this position. So, yes, Darlene.
So one concern that I see is the space issue. Just said it very well. There was a cafeteria and there was a gym in these other schools, so they're able to spread it out. I understand you're going to ask time for the Whitney. The Whitney also has other commitments of people that are, that are paying them for the use of the building. So that, and as far as using the teacher space, you talk about having meetings, that there's a whole logistics piece. I've been in school where people have used my classroom after school and they need a brown crayon, and they just have to get that crayon. So they're looking through all your stuff. So, I think a respect is certainly the staff and the teachers, just gotta make it smooth.
Absolutely.
Because you really want their cooperation and their help with it. They don't have to go every Tuesday and lock their stuff in the cabinet.
No, I think, there's a lot of coordination, and ultimately we want this to be something that everybody gets behind and is excited about, right? So it's like, this is the time to speak up and say, hey, I really believe in this and this would help. Like, here's a question that I can't quite sort out, because, we looked at doing the church, but that means bringing the kids over to that and the pieces of the puzzle. So, we asked the Whitney for one day, maybe it's something where as it grows and as the Whitney gets back to, as Susan put, real life, right? Like, maybe there are 2 days a week that it can be in the Whitney. But there also needs to be a place where everything is held for this program, as Gail talked about, right? Like, it can't sort of just be like a rolling, someone's car, and they're like, here, I have all the equipment for the enrichment program. Yeah.
Storage.
Yeah. So let's hop to the next, because this is the next step slide. We are recommending, so we are right now responding to your feedback, and if there's something to incorporate, to put a final proposal, so if there's any changes to this, and budget to the board to vote at the next meeting. So this, if there's thoughts that people have and they want to grab me or anybody in the committee after this, that's really the time to speak up. And then what we want to do is during this gap between the 2 meetings is have, I would ask the board to ask us to share our job descriptions with the personnel committee, so the personnel committee can finalize those. So that in June, we could vote as a board to move forward on this and to post those job descriptions. So Gail and her team have the lead time to go find that amazing coordinator and to see if we can somehow manifest a support position, which I want to believe is possible. So that's what we have. And then the idea is that the program would start in September. Jerry.
So the way I'm seeing it now is that the coordinator, it's kind of hanging in the coordinator position.
Exactly.
And that's the one where we need kind of a definitive kind of job description for.
Which we already have.
And that we should probably be as flexible as we can with the support position job description.
Nailed it.
And how that works.
Exactly.
So that's something, we need some creativity there.
Yeah, it really is, because if we can't staff that coordinator position, like we said, this can't start, which would be a total bummer. So if we can do everything we can to enable, that's why it's preferred that you are, but it's not mandated that you have a teaching. All of these pieces help us try to get someone in that position. But, Jerry, you spoke to it really well, which is we have flexibility with the support position. We need the coordinator position. Darlene, no, Beth Ann, please.
So first I just want to say thank you so much to the committee for doing this. As a 2-parent working household, having even one day, thank you, Erica, thank you, Allison, having one day covered, those extra few hours makes a huge difference. Trying to work at home is really difficult with young children. It puts a huge stress on the parent, It also stresses the children because, you know, the parent, I lose my patience because I'm trying to have a meeting and I'm like, no, you guys are doing this. And then TV becomes the babysitter, which I don't think is good for anyone. So something like this would just create so much of a more healthier environment for like a family like mine. And I think it's really important. I know there's other families, unfortunately, I think some of them couldn't come tonight, but like just having like the inconsistency where it's like, oh, we can only take 12 students. It's like a panic that morning, like, oh my God, I think, you know, gotta make sure they get in there and pray that they actually get selected to be in that one-day-a-week program, and doesn't always work out for everybody, which is hard, and I know it's hard on families and other parents. I mean, last year, my oldest son, Kingston, spent a lot of time in the post office, because that's where his dad works, you know, which isn't like the best for him, and he gets bored, and eventually he gets handed a phone, which is awful. So as much as Jess said how important it is for the kids, and it's also really important to have that healthy working family lifestyle, makes a big difference, huge difference. So
Thanks, Beth. I really appreciate that. Kate?
Well, that's also typical and normative of all public education,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That like, that's as a culture what we've developed in our schools, and so like, let's do this.
Yeah.
Right?
And actually, what's typical and normative is before care and after care. But we're not perfect. We're going one step at a time. But I
Easy by day.
I am not suggesting that, but I just want to put out like that is. So, like, this is not this exception, like, let's do this for Jackson. This is saying we're actually out of step here. So how do we bring this into step so that we can like support the families in a way that is kind of status quo?
yeah, and one other thing too is if I have that extra time on those certain days, I actually volunteer. Like the days that I don't,
Yeah.
I can push my, I'm lucky that I have a very flexible schedule where I can volunteer for skiing and soccer and that and to help, and I would more than be happy to volunteer for something like this sometime that when my schedule is not as crazy, you know,
Yes.
it's kind of this up and down cycle that I go through. So that's like another.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, Jerry.
As far as the revenue and the
Yeah.
things, and when it comes out to money anyway, what are the expectations of participating families?
So it's $10 if you are on full.
Not the dollar, the
Oh.
expectation, like, let's say, do you sign your kid up in advance and
Yes.
you pay for that?
You do,
regardless
so you-
whether they're there or not?
Yes, so and that's the way it's done everywhere. So you sign them on a semestral break basis, right? So it's like, I'm signing up for, you know, a Renee Kaz to be there for 2 days a week, and this is it, and then you pay, and if you don't use it, but like, because that's how you have to plan, right? Because there's no way, it's not a drop-in system. There's no drop-in thing happening here. So, yeah, that's
And
how.
daycare is usually run like that. I mean, I grew up in a home daycare, and my mom, even when, you know, you're sick, well, unless she can't provide
still have
the
to
care,
staff it.
you still have to staff it, right?
Yeah.
So something like.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have to add a revenue if you do maintenance. It costs, every minute costs money.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's like that's.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Erica.
So I'm not certain, but would each family need to commit to the 3 days, or is there an option?
No, they could do 1 day, they could do 2 days, they could do 3 days. So it wouldn't be that you have to do all 3. That's a great question, yeah. And you know, in the survey, we saw that 80-some% of the families said 3 to, no, it was 100% said 3 to 5 days, right? So, you know, that's what we're basing this off. But absolutely, you would say, you know what, for this semester, I'm gonna do Mondays. For, you know, I know we don't really talk about semesters in grammar, but I still use that. So, you know, from September to December, we really want 1 day. From January to June, we're gonna go for 3 days.
Just might just clear that up a little bit.
Thank you.
And I'll do your math up there. 100% didn't commit to 3 to 5 days, 100% commit to 3 days.
No, actually it's different because the way the survey was worded, Jerry, and we can bring that up the actual survey, is that it was like, do you want to use this program in 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day? And nobody said that it, I can't remember. Anyway, can I get back to you on the details?
100% said 3 days.
Yeah.
30% said 5 days.
But it was,
Yes. So above 100% said more than 3 days or more.
3 or more.
Oh,
3 or more.
100% said 3 or more. Yeah.
Yes. Are we aligned?
Yeah, but I mean, that's a goofy way to look at it in my mind.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, you're only proposing 3 days, and 100% of parents said they needed 3 days. So
Yes.
that's a bolster from the argument.
Yeah,
for 3 days.
and I mean, honestly, if we had more, I think that, but like, that's why we're saying, let's be super responsible, let's be conservative, let's start this with something that we can wrap our heads around and have a win on, right? And that's really what we wanna, what the committee recommends. So given that, What do you guys think? Can we go back to next steps?
Oh, yeah.
So for next steps, do these sound like the right next steps from a board standpoint? And would you like us to move forward with this? Is that like because I would like to know from you all if that's the case, in which case our committee can then go ahead and work on those job descriptions. And I'm not hearing there are major changes that need to be made with this at this time, but they could come up between now and the June meeting.
I say yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So yes, I mean, there's some details, the logistics and stuff, but as far as moving ahead with the job descriptions, yes.
Great.
I'm satisfied with the budget.
Awesome.
We as a committee, community that.
Awesome.
And just, we are gonna need to finalize that summer number
Yes.
too, hopefully by then. So-
Yes. Oh yeah, it's got to be done. Otherwise, you're gonna pull your hair out.
Speaking out loud in this forum.
Make it happen. No.
I think for next time,
Yeah.
you're still calling it a proposal. so-
Then we want to vote on it in June.
Well, that's the point, yeah. There'll be a vote that night.
But you
Be a
like it.
recommendation.
Okay, recommendation. Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you all. And I really want to reiterate, if anyone in the community has ideas or questions, and definitely Susan and Joan, I'm here, so please grab me. And, we want to make this something that sails in this community. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a lot of work, I appreciate it.
Nice job, Allison.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Going back to number 4, presentation of school programs, FYI.
I have none in music and stuff.
Right, music teacher isn't able to be with us tonight.
Okay. All right, old business, moving on, school options for the committee, establish a committee and makeup. So, we should establish a committee for investigating all of our options for Jackson students for high school. So, we need to formalize that.
Recommendation would be to have somebody chair that committee from the board. And then you're going to have 2 board members on there, or 1, and then what the makeup is, and then you can kind of move from there.
Jen, we haven't talked about it, but I'd be happy to be on that. So I would like to have 2. I know Darlene is interested.
I was on the board, that meeting before, and I asked to continue on.
Yep, I got names.
So this is a little bit different than, right, this is localized to.
I know, but that helps
Yeah.
get the information
You
to the,
got
yeah, that's why I mentioned to Jen, it seems to make sense.
So you two. Okay.
Yeah, on that.
And then I'll also step in. So what I'm looking for from this board
Yes,
is,
yes,
or this committee, would be to go and find out what our options are. We also need to educate the public as to what those options are and how we got here. So listening posts, those types of things.
And our time frame is set.
Yes, so we have like a year.
If you two want, I can help kind of do that.
Well, we love that.
Yeah.
So I did send out a message.
We have your number.
You got it, you got it.
So I sent out a message through the school and through the e-news, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people from the community without Darlene and without Kate who would like to be on that board. So I'd like to have that going forward, and then the minutes of the meetings should be open. So that if anybody else would like to join in, they can join in. They should be posted, that type of thing, and then reporting back to the school.
I'll work with you two, we'll set some, just kind of parameters and some membership, and maybe a timeline. Go from there.
And then these people are interested.
I see that list.
So if we need to vote on the committee, no, we're good, right?
I think that if they get things rolling, that they, give the list to them, and then they can bring it back in June, they can formally approve that subcommittee. They'll have a better idea of who that's going to be and the time they're going to be, and stuff, so it makes more
Scope
sense.
of the work, and if there's something else that the board wants to add into it.
Yep, okay.
I do want to clarify for the record, at the SU 9 meeting the other night, Scott Grant, during public comments, Scott Grant, a Bartlett board member, and during public comments, he said, I didn't correct him at the time because I didn't think it was appropriate for this to be that was a whole other subject about public comments there, but I didn't correct him at the time anyway, but he said that Jackson has a committee looking into withdrawing from Kennett. And I just want to get the messaging about this committee straight up front. This committee is not about withdrawing from Kennett. This committee is about, we need to, sometime by 2023, I think late 2023, June 2023, decide whether we're going to continue the current contract that we have with Conway. So we'd like to be able to make an intelligent decision before then about how we go about doing that. And certainly, one of the things we need to know is what are all of our options as far as high school for our students in Jackson. And it's just a way so we'll keep and say, well, did you look into these things? Yes, we looked into this. Kennett may be our best option. This committee might come up with other things. We want this committee to make a recommendation back to the board about where our high school kids should be going. It's not anything at all to do with withdrawing from Kennett. It's about making sure that we have the best information to bring members when we have to get that contract approved. Because we don't look into this and let's say we bring a contract, well, we've got a 20-year contract to send our kids to Conway for high school, and people say, well, like, did you look into anything else? That would be kind of a silly thing to do. So this is really about just worrying what our options are so that we can make the best informed decision that we can. And it's the statement that we're withdrawing from a committee to withdraw from Kennett is not accurate. I did actually clarify with Lloyd Jones from the paper at the meeting, but I didn't clarify that publicly yet, but I did want to say that here just to get it on the record.
Thanks, Sharon.
Spicy idea.
Spicy. All right, so moving on, consideration of the Jackson School Board strategic plan. We tabled it last month because there was just 3 of us. We would like to vote on the strategic plan to make it formalized so that we can use it for our goal-setting session in the next few weeks as well as moving forward. So, does anybody have any questions on the strategic plan? We can make a motion to accept. Motion to accept?
You got a second then?
Do I? Well,
Okay, I'll second it. I just was the bigger driver, so I was trying to zip it over here.
I mean, I'm happy to second it.
Second it. You know me, darling, that's impossible.
So I'd like to thank Micah and your team for all the work that you put in to do that, as well as to Gail and everybody else who contributed to that as well.
A really robust community involvement and
Community and
yeah.
so thank you all very much. I think it's a great plan for us to utilize going forward to springboard off of and check back in with. So thank you very much. So,
Yeah, it was an honor.
all those in favor? Okay. So we're up to instructional issues. We have second reading and adoption. We're going to vote to motion on all of AS 6A1 through 13 and vote on them separately.
So moved.
Second. Can I read some letters?
Yeah, you ready? You got
Yeah,
it?
you need to take a vote on the motion.
Vote on the motion. Thank you. All right. All right, approve GBH staff student relations.
Do you have to do motion, second, discussion?
No, that's what you're from. We just need to vote.
Okay, we just need all those in favor?
Or, no, that was unanimous.
Yeah.
It's not just vote, you can also comment.
Yeah,
if you
of
want
course.
to.
But you don't have to do motion and second.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
GBE medical examinations of school personnel. All in favor? All right. GCCBC Family and Medical Leave Act. FMLA. Favor? ICA school year, school calendar. Favor? GCK professional staff assignments and transfers. Favor? K8 public gifts. Also accept gifts. Okay. Non-contracted, contracted personnel policies. All in favor? Thank you. IFA, instructional needs of each individual student. All in favor? IMG, animals in school. Favor? Yes. EEAD, school bus safety program. Favor? EEA, student transportation services. EEAA, mandatory drug and school alcohol testing. And EEBC, use of private vehicles to transport students. All right, instructions. Consider personnel action.
We just have a non-public at the end of the meeting, right?
Yep.
We'll go into.
Business affairs, 21-22 budget status report. Is there be anything I missed?
No, all the schools, I know Susan does a great job kind of closing up the purchasing of things in terms of the lines so that, you know, we can have an accurate projection and close out things as quickly as we can at the end of June.
FYI, program assurances for federal formula grants.
Yes, so this, last time you had the general assurances that you approved. This is an FYI, so if you have Title I, Title II, 3, 4, 5, and some of the other grants, this is just more program-specific grants that we will be following as well as the general assurances. So part of what we have to do is fill these out and say that we're going to abide by these guidelines as well.
Okay, thank you. C, budget transfer between functions, so we did have some moving going on there. Is it $4,000, right?
Yeah. That was for the paving, for the seal cracking?
Yes,
It didn't say where we're going to and from.
Yeah, it's,
it came from the $50,000 we had left for the study,
the architectural
building,
stuff.
the
Oh, right.
architectural study.
Yep.
It was something the board had authorized, or at least told us that we could explore that.
Absolutely. Thank you, okay. And consider Bartlett Jackson tuition contract.
If I might.
We need a motion.
No, well, you could. So you have a 3-year agreement with Bartlett to send your 7th and 8th grade students. Put it in the packet. If you folks are good and comfortable with this, you can approve it tonight. You can make any changes that you choose to, and we can bring that back to Bartlett, but it's pretty standard. So it's up to the board how you choose to move forward. And it was discussed at the joint board.
We discussed it at the joint board.
I think it would have had to make changes last year.
Yeah.
For this year, actually, we're already on
Coming into it, yeah.
I just reiterate that, you know, for the record anyway, that this, the benefit that the Jackson gets from this is that we only pay for students that we actually send. There's no equalized evaluation piece of this contract. In other words, if we had to pay equalized evaluation, like let's say 65% of the contract is equalized evaluation, even if we sent no kids to Bartlett, we'd still be paying a percentage of the Bartlett school budget for their 7th and 8th grade. And so this is only based on, it's basically only based on a per student cost, based on what Bartlett actually spends per student. And it's a pretty fair contract for us. It's a fair contract for Bartlett as well because it's, again, based on their average student cost, which is pretty high. But that's the way it works when you have small schools and same kind of overhead that every school has. So their cost of students are high, but it's the benefit to Jackson is we don't pay any equalized evaluation. We do pay a small 2% rental fee, which is pretty standard in any contract that you have tuition agreements with. And that's basically for capital costs that Bartlett has built in that they have for their upkeep of their buildings and grounds and all. So it's a good contract.
Do we want to move forward on it then, so that we have?
I don't think we actually have a choice.
Well, no, but I meant instead of the next meeting.
It's kind of complicated. I'm going to take a look at this language on it, where it does talk about contract termination renewal. Any renewal shall be negotiated and submitted to the respective legislative bodies at the annual district meeting, which occurs during the 2nd year of the contract term. And then it says the contract may be amended by either side with mutual agreement. Negotiations for renewal occur at the end of the 2nd year. So
We're at the end of the 2nd year.
yeah, right, but it would have had to have been approved
Earlier to do it.
in March in order to.
Yeah.
So if you're comfortable, just
I'm comfortable approving it now, if it doesn't have any meaning in the real world as far as what the contract actually says, that's okay with me too.
I think we'll just strike out this line here.
That sounds, just to make it more clear, I would do down.
Yeah,
that.
just
Yeah.
if you take a look at here. Yeah, it's kind of negotiation with the period. But here it asks for which occurs during the second year of the term. So you would have had to have gone to your body there, but then you can amend during the second year. So I think maybe just strike that line.
Yeah, I think that, did we mess up at all, we can get it approved at the annual district meeting?
Right, and I think both sides are
Right.
to it, yeah.
Which this, I think, I don't know whether this contract allows for specifically or not, but contracts in general do.
Yeah.
We can lapse it for this year and we get it approved next year.
Yeah.
And be fine.
Right, that's what I just put it on the March.
So yeah, Mark, it's okay with us taking that piece out, and we are, I think, that, we did the exact same thing last time too.
Yeah, it was three years ago.
Right.
The last one we were okay, I think it was
Maybe the one before that?
9 years ago, yeah. Those 3-year contracts here.
That's the other aspect of this, is a really good deal for Jackson, it's just a 3-year contract, so we're not locked into it forever, but I can't see us having a better option in middle school unless something changes, so I'll make a motion to approve the contract for now. If we need to get it done, again, at the next annual district meeting, we'll just do that.
I can second that.
All right, all those in favor? Thank you. All right, Kevin.
Yes, just a couple things. Committee process, we have some new go-getters and just doing a real nice job. I know Micah calls and says, am I doing this okay? Just a reminder that, you know, board business should be done in public, and that includes posting of committees and getting the minutes to the board so that everybody has an opportunity to do that. I know it's you folks do a tremendous amount of work. Just be careful that the conversations are not board work, and when they're official board work, we'll just make sure that we post it both on the SEU website and in your local business. I know Susan's real good about making sure that goes into the news and posted wherever it needs to be. So kudos to you for doing this, because sometimes it's real easy just to have conversations with people and then just bring it forward without the backup information. So just a reminder to do that. I also put together in the packet, again, I think it was a wise move for Gail, whether she realizes it or not, to give plenty of lead time. And how many times do we have to say, no, she's not retiring this June, it's a year from now. So you can send flowers again next year for her. But the timeline is in the packet here. So really, what we'd be looking for is, you know, probably a couple of board members to be on that official committee, and then walk through reviewing the job description and other responsibilities, bring it back to the board through the personnel committee as well, and then hopefully you folks will adopt that. And then start to get some feedback from the public, from the staff members, and then from the board members, to go through and identify those characteristics and see where those crosswalks are. Start developing strategies for recruiting the best replacement you can. It's also, that would be in October. And you folks can weigh in on whether you think it's too aggressive or not aggressive enough. I've run it by a number of people in historically when the best time is to advertise for these different positions. And then you're also in budget time at that time. So, you know, there are some things that you might want to think about in terms of adding to the budget or reducing to the budget, setting the salary ranges, those type of things. If you're going to put in moving expenses for somebody because they're the best everywhere. I mean, they're just different things that you want to talk about and reworking the principal's contract as well. And then committee starting in December, really putting the committee together, starting to advertise December through January. If you think that's late, we could.
That's too late.
Okay, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We can move that up. I just think that from a historical perspective and seeing principals apply, I don't know if it's worth going too far before November. You could do that November, December.
I think with holidays and life being really full, giving the committee a little bit more time to be a committee and to look at this is what I would recommend. So I'd like to see it starting in November so that we have a little bit more time. And I understand that we might not have people coming into the fray until later, but I'd like to have that committee have a really good working relationship so that we're not like off the bat, because it feels really fast to think that, you know, the first meeting committee is in February, and then, you know, you're in reference checks and you're electing your candidate March, April.
Yeah, I could see
That feels too.
my thought process was the committee started in the beginning.
Yeah, I would have thought this committee started at the beginning too, but you're
Well, the smaller committee.
Right.
Okay.
So after you go through vetting all the processes,
Oh.
then you're going to select how
You're
many
talking about
parents,
the hiring
a
committee,
parent,
the actual.
and
So there's
the-
okay, so
Yeah.
so there's
Your
a development
committee-
situation.
This committee is gonna start in July.
Got it,
Okay.
that makes more
So
sense.
that's the board and maybe.
So what's that committee called versus the other committee?
Well, they get the interview.
The little committee that they
One is the principal search committee, which will start in July,
Okay, got it.
and then the interview committee. How's that?
Perfect, thank you so much. I agree with it then.
I will.
Okay.
See, she get back to me now, right? That's good. And then hopefully, yeah, we'll look at this timeline with folks.
Great.
Wherever you're comfortable. This is just like I said, a draft to get things moving. We are paying attention to that. Yeah, it's nice to be able to have time.
Thank you, yeah.
Because I think that it's an important job for the community, and it also allows Gail to kind of think about, because you may want to have transitional opportunities as well, and that's why budgetarily, do you want to keep, if Gail's willing, 10 days in July that are available for consultation, if she's not traveling or steal her away from the beach or whatever. You can do it hourly, however you choose to. I think that's a good succession plan for stability within the district, so.
Thanks for putting this together.
Sure.
Do we want to talk about who's on the principals committee now, or is that part of the next committee?
Do that in June.
Yeah, think about.
I just didn't know if we should put it inside of all the other committee stuff, just while people.
Well, it's on the committee list on the bottom.
Oh, yeah, it is, there it is.
I already added it. So
We're all over.
We're gonna go over that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gail?
Okay. So thanks to our PTO and that grant from Berlin City that they talked about a few months back, we had Jackson artist Laurie Stearns come and work with the children, and they made some really beautiful 4x4 tiles, mosaic tiles. She came and led, and every child made one, and the staff had a session as well. And she did a really nice job. The kids seemed to have a blast doing it. The plan is that she is now going to take them and grout them, as I understand it, and then they will become tiles that we will affix to the posts at the pavilion. We might need more, but it was a way to kind of finish those poles with the kind of art from the student body. So it's nicely done, and we thank our PTO and Berlin City for providing another artist in residence for us. 2 in a row we did a play. We did some visual arts now, so Carrie worked with her to pull that off.
Awesome. And you had something last Tuesday. What was that? I was gone. You did something last week. I don't remember. It was a nighttime thing.
Oh, Howard Hoyt from
Yes.
our DEI committee, yes, he came and did a parent evening. It was fairly well attended, and again, the PTO stepped up and did some pizza party and childcare to enable folks to come and talk with him about some of the work the teachers have been doing with him around gender and diversity.
Sorry, I had my own function.
Allison, excuse me, did we have a recording of that evening?
I do, I have it saved. The sound isn't the best, but I do have that. I'm able to share that.
Would that be on the website?
We can put that up on the website.
Thank you.
And then finally, I have had no luck in hiring anyone for the summer program yet again. I've reached out to Conway about the potential of sending our students to John Fuller would be the closest, providing transportation. I also did a quick survey of our families, and it wasn't a huge interest, but we had 5 or 6 students who might be taking advantage of that if that was an option for them. So I'm waiting for Conway to set their budget to finish hiring their people and see if there'll be space available, but hopefully we'll know soon.
Great, thanks, Kim. Thank you. All right, committee reports, committee assignments. So let's go to our committee assignments.
Did we just say it's all good?
Yeah, I just want to make sure. So I do want to go over the bus committee was brought up at the Bartlett meeting. They want to start sharing buses again, so I'm going to push that to the bus committee, Darlene, if you still want to.
We're not going to use the diesel ones, we're going to park them for now.
Fair enough.
Electric,
Pick that up at that meeting.
coasting downhill.
All right, so we'll just go through it quickly. So budget, we still have Jerry and Micah. Are you guys still good with that? Yep. All right, policy, myself and Kate. Kate, you still good with that from this morning? All right, joint boards, we have Jerry, Darlene, and myself. Manifest, myself, Kate, and Darlene. Pretty much everybody. Bus, Darlene. Curriculum review, Jerry and Darlene. Special education reviews, Kate. Joint loss management is Darlene. New Hampshire SBA delegate as needed. Kennett High School handbook review, myself. Executive board is myself. Facilities, Jerry and Kate. You guys still good with that?
Yes.
Career Technical Advisory Council, I'm still good with that. Bartlett Curriculum Committee, that's you and I. Jerry, okay, all right. Yeah, we're good. Bartlett Policy Committee, myself, Personnel, Kate and Micah, you guys still good with that? Yep. All right, Library, Darlene, and the Whitney, you still good? All right, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, Mike and Kate?
Absolutely.
All right. SAU 9 Social Justice Committee?
Yeah, that's not.
Is that not me? We haven't met this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to be on that?
Okay, yes, absolutely.
Sign me up. Twice.
Okay. All right, we've disbanded the cooperative school district.
But it'll
have-
reemerge as the
right, the high school
tuition
option.
review. Yeah.
The health and wellness, Kate, you still good with that? I know, it meets a lot. Okay, strategic planning, Micah and Jerry.
Yeah, and that'll kind of transition into just like managing it, so.
Right.
Yeah, versus creating it, which would
Yeah.
be lovely.
We'll move off of that. So the high school options, we have Kate and Darlene. All right. And then we do have other people on my list that are non-school board members. And then the principal search committee, I know I would like to be on the.
I'd be happy to be a part of that as well.
Yeah, okay. So we have 2. Okay. So we're good with that.
Cool, can I make a request? I would like to establish some sort of place. I know, I thought about like a board in here in Whitney, but folks don't come in here. I want people to be able to physically see what committees there are, what we're on, and what parents, community members, people are participating. Like, I don't know if it can be outside of Susan, put it on the website, sort of laminated something. It's places, so the reason I ask is because it is places, it's in minutes, it is around, right, you can find it. But the number of times that we all participate in things and someone says, oh, I didn't know that was happening. Like, oh, who from the community is on that? Like, let's actually, like, I'll make it colorful, we can, like, I'm afraid of the bulletin board, you know, like, but honestly, like, I want, and then that way, community members, like, because I think folks are participating now. Thank you. I heard everyone came last time, and I wasn't here. But like, thank you. I'm really excited that this volume of people is in this room. And I think that if other people see like, oh hey, Erin's on that, that's cool. Like somebody's participating in this thing, and like that's maybe someone's like, oh, I'm interested in that conversation. I'll join. Like, if you can see it and it's clear, then it's less of like, oh, I didn't know that conversation was happening. Who's having it? Like let's figure out, maybe Susan, maybe we can work together to figure out a place. Like, I know that our little glass thing is very small. I want that to be much bigger. Like some place that this can be, is physical and tangible, that you don't have to go inside buildings and things like that to get to necessarily, but that as a community, we can see what we're all participating in, and then the opportunities for you all and community-wide participation there is to maybe drum up some interest elsewhere.
Yeah,
Cool?
I like that idea. I nominate you to do that.
I'm joking. Try to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right, so the enrichment committee we've done, and then the Bartlett Jackson, we've, well, you saw the minutes, we went to the meeting, Darla and I were there.
Thank you for going.
It was a good meeting, we actually discussed some things on sports.
Sports?
So, sports.
Oh, it's sports. I was like, oh, cool.
Sports play that.
So just trying to figure out, they're having a drop in their participation.
I think that's nationwide.
We're just trying to figure out why, and we kind of pushed it back to Kevin to look at the high school level and the athletic director and saying, like, what can we do? Do we have too many options, not enough students anymore? Is it a COVID hangover type of situation? And just kind of knowing what we're doing as opposed to just brushing it under the rug, because sports are really important for our students of all ages and our athletes and everybody. So they learn so much in sports, just in school. And it does help keep them out of trouble and get it. Yep. So there's lots of reasons to encourage sports, and whether we change some things that are offered. So we're going to be pushing to look at that.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to take a look at the macro and the micro as well, because you are right, it's not just here, it's kind of everywhere. Problem is, you're right, coming out of COVID, we see the impacts. It's not just sports, it's getting people together in different areas, That's why the more opportunities and dovetails with your enrichment program as well. We saw, you put these kids together, they want to be with each other and get away from these things for a while and go from there.
Otherwise, the joint board committee was pretty status quo. It was interesting. It was good. It's always good to get together with them and learn what they're doing and their frustrations with their staffing and how many kids they have coming in and out. They did bring up the bus. They want to start utilizing the same bus routes again and stuff. So
the good news is, if you have middle school students that are being promoted, they do have end of the year activities. They're pulling more public, so they're opening up their building a little bit more over in Bartlett as well.
All right, and then date for next meeting is June 20th at 6 p.m.
I know based on family commitments, I won't be here that night, so my apologies. I really tried very hard not to. I won't be able to attend.
I'll be dead hosting lunch for the SAE. So, and then our Jackson board goal setting session is for May 31st from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock here at the Whitney Center. And any other citizen comments at this time? Oh, sorry.
Citizen comments.
Yep.
Just real quick on this, at the last SAE9 meeting, seems like there might be a push for a policy change to allow for responding to public comments during the SAE9 meeting. And I think as a board, it'll come up at the next board meeting, I believe, probably. And I think that our position should be that we should not allow board members to respond to public comments at the SAE9 meeting. Kind of keep the policy the way it's been, so we don't have, the SAE9 doesn't have a policy on it, so it's at the chair's discretion. And Nancy is not currently allowing the board to respond to public comments. We should continue with that, otherwise this meeting might just become kind of crazy and hectic.
not productive. So I would recommend that our board would vote to keep that. You know, if it becomes a policy to vote against allowing board members to respond to public comments. But Kevin, the SAU staff often responds to it, but, which is good because that's just to clarify things sometimes. But right now, Nancy doesn't allow board members to respond, so I think we should just keep that in place.
But I don't think that's unusual. As a teacher, I sat on the school board in Connecticut for 4 years, and the board members did not comment. Superintendent maybe occasionally said something, or I'll call you next, I'll get in touch with you, or the chairperson, but I don't think it's uncommon.
Yeah, like I said, the SM9 meeting, that's
Right.
common for every board,
Well,
there is,
yeah.
whether it's a planning board, select board, or
Pretty much, because 27 different opinions do not necessarily equate in the way you might explain
Some
something.
information, yeah.
Exactly.
Joan, or?
Do you want me to go? I was just going to say, going back to the high school committee, because Tin Mountain is a contractor at the high schools, I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to join that committee, but I do think I spend a lot of time in the 3 closest high schools to Jackson, a lot of time, and so I just would love to share. I have a lot of insight fly on the wall, whether it's competencies or standards, blocks versus periods, school culture, discipline coming down, but I see a lot. So I don't know if I can officially be a part of that board, because I don't know if that's
You're on it.
That's not a conflict.
Mike's on it.
Well, just for myself, like whether I can separate
Oh.
myself as a parent, myself as an employee for Tin Mountain, myself as a community member. I just need to think about that for myself. But I'd like to.
I've gotten some people already that are not going to be on the committee, but they're going to come in and do speaking that have, history, information, and be strategic, and may not have like the bandwidth. So we have some of those
Yeah.
people.
So I just wanted to volunteer my insight.
Have
Didn't-
coffee with a committee member, maybe.
But also, if you reconcile and you think you could be on the committee inside of all those roles, you'd be very welcome. I think it'd be great to have you on. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
The last time we really delved into this, it's good to have all kind of views come into it. So it's helpful to have people who are advocating for specific things, and whether you're advocating for Freiburg Academy, advocating for Gorham. It's good to have that like that, because then you get a better sense of what's really happening.
And we'll have your number.
Yeah. Joan?
Jen, just really quick, thinking about your sports committee, just something to store in the back of your brain, opportunities and ways for the public schools or, Bartlett or whoever, however you're going to work on that, to interact a little bit more closely with clubs. I can think, we got club hockey, we got club soccer, we got club lacrosse, we got Little League baseball, and as someone on the board of the soccer club, I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect with schools, and to put things together, you might find that you could really work on health and wellness of kids as a big community instead of trying to do it just as a school. So just something to store in your brain on that committee.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah.
Is there a committee about sports?
No, it just started to, like, it just came to
Oh,
light.
well, I'm sorry,
this
whatever
issue.
you said.
No, I
So,
I thought I missed something, so that was helpful.
She said sports are very important, and then
Yeah.
You said, we have a committee then.
whatever, go done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on that comment there, our experience with Thomas going into Bartlett, really wanting the Nordic ski, for example, there, like, it was really an odd dichotomy between, like, here, like, geez, we have, like, we ski, like, on the back of our hoodies, right? And then going into Bartlett, only having, like, 2 kids who wanted to ski, and Jen having, challenges getting Bartlett to actually do their Nordic program, and finally, like, she single-handedly had to chase down the Kennett middle school coach, so Thomas and Hunter could do that. So I think, like, I don't know what the answer is, but like, there's definitely like a miss in how we get like such a vibrant like Nordic culture here, and then at Bartlett only 2 kids to do it. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's just another data point. I think connections to clubs, so Jen's working really close with Ellen to kind of figure out something that can provide more of like a funnel into that. But
It's the funnel process,
Yeah.
and that's always ebbed and flowed depending on the coach.
Sure. Yeah.
If you have an active parent that went along with with their kids, you were lucky enough to tail them. But the Nordic has always been a little bit of a stepchild situation, all the way through. And they're working on it though, and it's coming along nicely. Yeah. So keep it up, all right? All right, so we, any other citizen comments at this time? We have to close for a non-public session.
Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you so much for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, second.